Alright, so it's time to put the starter together. Hopefully within the next couple weeks we're going to have this together enough to fire up, so I need a starter. Unfortunately, there was no teardown video of this. I actually, this has been apart for about a year and a half. I took it apart, cleaned it up, before I even knew I was going to start making videos. Unfortunately, the magneto and carburetor were the same way. Did the magneto and carburetor before I decided I was going to make videos also. But I still do have a backup magneto I'll build one day, and I'll probably do that on video. But here's what we got. Got starter, housing, and field coils. Got a Bendix. It's in really good shape. This isn't that old. I actually replaced this Bendix back in the 90s, shortly before we quit using the tractor. The original one was chewed up really bad. If you remember what the flywheel looked like on the tractor, you'd see why. On my teardown video of the engine, we show the flywheel teeth, and it's pretty mangled up. But this was in good shape. Back in the 90s, CarQuest Auto Parts actually had this in stock. So that was interesting. It was an old crusty box, but it was there. So the button, the same thing, was replaced back then, although I did clean it up and paint it because it was corroded. Bead blasted all the contacts on the inside so they were clean. Also, bead blasted this one, although I need to straighten it out a little bit. Nose cone's a little mangled up here, and so is the back, because tapping it with a hammer and whatever over the years to make it work at times. This armature is actually off of the parts tractor. This one was just so much better, I was just going to go ahead and use this one. Then there's a various assortment of springs and brushes and all that we'll deal with. Something the parts tractor had installed that mine did not was this. So this piece acts as a shield, I guess, to keep debris from the bell housing getting into the starter motor. So I'm going to definitely put that in. Alright, so first step, I need to remember how to put all these brushes together. Okay, so there's a couple surfaces here. 2 brushes have to be grounded to this plate. I did clean off the paint where those brushes will ground and chase the threads so it's clean. There's a couple other things. This plate has to ground to this front nose cone also, but I have a lot of parts painted. I'll show you how I'm going to do that when we get to that point. I will make sure we got a good ground. First, we'll just set these in place. How they go. So that's how your brush holders go. This little tab here hits this pin, stops it from going in too far. In the past, I have accidentally installed them like this, and obviously it's not in the right place. So these people that go out and down. Alright, so we have 4 brushes and a few wires. And I'm missing a ground wire actually. Alright, there we go. Okay, first step, I'm going to go ahead and install the 2 brushes that go to ground. These brushes aren't really old either. I just replaced these the same time as I did the Bendix. Okay. So also, because they might be worn in at a particular angle, I'm mounting them down the same way they were. I don't want to flip them over. The way I could tell is there's a square patch where this tab went. You can see where it bolts down and which side was up. Okay. Also, before I tighten these down for good, I want to make sure they're actually square with the commutator. So I'll leave these loose, put this in place, and then get them square, and then tighten them down. One. I'll blast through this one. Okay, just looking at this, I think I did these wrong. Yeah, they go like that. Not like that. What happens when it's been forever? This video is too long, I'll edit that out and do it right the first time. If it's not too bad, I'll roll with it. That's better. Okay. Okay, that does look like it worked fine like that. But there's one thing we'll need to do. We need to install the spring. Okay, what happens, this long tab of the spring presses against this brush holder. This tab presses against that pin. Now, need to wind it. Sometimes a little tricky. Go get a pair of needle nose pliers. Okay, so I'll partially put it in place. I'm going to push this tab where I could reach it with pliers. Man, that got me, but it didn't bleed. I guess I'm okay there. Now I'm just doing this one first because the wire's not in the way. It'll make it easier. Okay, got it. Let me go ahead and do this one with the wire in the way. I should have probably mounted that one first before I did that. Yeah, I definitely recommend it. Don't put the brushes on first, mount the brush holders. That one definitely went on easier. Maybe I'm just better at it now. Alright, last one. Go ahead and screw down this ground wire. Make sure the wire clears your bolt holes where your bolt comes through. Make sure you have free movement of the brush. Alright. Now for these. Now, we have two tabs here. Those will both mount to these. So it doesn't really matter which side you put this on as far as the field's concerned. But it's going to mount something like this. Let's get one brush on and go from there. Okay, it'll mount something like that. Alright, now I want to square up these brushes. So I will temporarily install this armature. Okay, so there's no play in this bushing, so that's good. So I can just set this down. Tighten down these screws. And once it's close, I know it's tight enough it's not going to move. I can lift it to get to the flat of the screw a little better. So I'll push down. Get it a little tight. Then I'll lift it up to get better access to it. What I'm going to do right now is look under these with light behind it. Make sure I see no gaps. There don't seem to be any, so they're all square. Clean, everything looks good. Okay, so in our armature, a couple things you need to do. You need to install the Bendix, install that shield. There's a bushing in the shield that we'll need to lubricate. Now, if I just slid this on, it would hit my windings, but between this shield and the armature, there's 3 washers. Metal washer, a softer fiber washer, and a little bit harder fiber washer. Maybe at one time these were all the same. I don't know. The way these were arranged, the large fiber washer went on first, the metal washer was on, then the smaller fiber washer. And I didn't look at an exploded view or anything to see if that's how it was or if this has been apart before and put together wrong. But it seemed logical to me, so that's how it came apart, so I'm going to go with it. Put a little bit of grease on the first washer. Put more on the next. Just doing one side, putting one layer of grease between them. And I'm going to put some grease on the shaft where this bearing is going to ride. And a little bit in the hole. And on the edge there where it's going to touch the washers. Alright, so at that point, it's just going to slide down and ride right there. There's now a gap between these windings so it can't touch. Next up is the Bendix. So first thing we do, we install a key, and then there is this sleeve that slides on that the Bendix is going to mount to. And the bolt that goes through that actually engages this hole on the armature shaft to hold it in place. Oops. Go. On. I've already cleaned this up, so put a little bit of grease on here so the armature can move smoothly. Keep it from getting rusty anyway. I don't want a lot of grease that's going to sling off. But this piece actually rides on the shaft. I also want to put a little bit of grease on there. There's some there already, but there's a little felt washer here that's oil soaked. Alright. Now one thing I had to do to this armature, whoever had this apart before held up this piece and took a hammer and beat the shaft out of it, which mushroomed the end, so I had to fix the end of that. It wasn't too big a deal. Alright, so it's going to line up like that. This tab on this lock washer is going to go in between the end of the spring and the first coil like that. Torque spec's good and tight. I bent this tab up against the flat of this bolt to stop it from coming loose. That's our completed armature. A lot of the things to look at here. This larger washer is on the back. I'm not sure if both of these washers were on the front or just one. So what I'm going to do is once I get this together, I'll put it together and see if I have any end play in the shaft. And if I do and I need the second washer, I'll put it on. Alright, so now we get to put the brushes back on the rear half. But first I want to grease this bearing without getting any on the brushes. I should say bushing. So put some on the inside where this washer is going to make contact. There's a couple grooves in there too. If you fill those, it'll retain grease for it. Okay. Now I'll try to keep all that grease off of this mess. Maybe if I temporarily set this in here, it'll hold it up for me. Then make sure you don't get no grease squirting out. It's good. There's not a lot of excess grease in there, so it's not going to sling out. These are close to where they're supposed to be. Okay. I'll borrow some tape, set this in to hold it upright. So I'll show you a lot of this afterwards, but these little wires here, they need to line up with these connections for the fields. There's an alignment hole and a pin. So if I put this wire on right, it should put it in the right place. I screwed up. This plate wasn't on here because I'm used to putting these together without the plate. If the plate's not on here, you can slide it together just like that. Slide the field over it. But with the plate there, you can't fit the field over. So you would either put this part together after you install it in the housing, or install the brushes in the housing and try to slide all this through and get it to line up. I'm going to try that first, so I don't have to take that Bendix all apart. Guess some more examples of what happens when leave it apart for too long. That fits into place, and I need to find my screws that go into there because I don't see them out. Alright, found a bunch. It had some mismatched screws going on before. Let's see. Get this one in. Okay, that one started. Go for this one. A couple tests I did on all this before I cleaned it up, and after I cleaned it up I checked for shorts to ground to check for continuity between the field coils and the case, and it was open, which is good. And the same thing in the windings on the starter. I didn't check for any open windings because I don't have a growler, but sure this isn't touching anything. Just watching this wire all the way around, make sure it's not touching anything, but that's what it looks like. Okay, now I gotta try to get that armature in and hold these brushes out of the way. I'm gonna cheat. If this works, this will be even easier than doing it the other way. Yeah, I have a nail holding the brush out of the way. So I can push the brush. Well, I can't do it on the ones with that in the way, but I can do it on the ground brushes, so that's okay. Getting two out of the way is better than none. So right up like that. So now I just have two to deal with. That's much easier because I have two hands. Alright, and I'll remove the nails. And we're in. So this notch here, I believe that goes on the bottom. Yeah, and this is the bottom. Because our lug here for the buttons on top on this model. Alright. Next up, a little grease. A little more. So on this one, once again, there's an alignment dowel there. A hole on the bottom to match. Okay. Right now, putting a screwdriver under, seeing if there's in play, which there is. So I'm going to add this next washer, see if that changes anything. Washer looks like it might be too thick for this. So we'll see. I mean, I want a little bit of play. I don't want it to be tight at all. But just want to make sure there's not too much. Yeah, still play in there. I think we're going to go with that unless it changes something when we tighten it up. Rotates really nice. Alright. Next step is to run our bolts all the way through. So this plate with the brushes has to be grounded to this front nose of the starter because that's how this starter gets grounded. I did leave paint in between these two. So what I'm doing here to make sure I got a good ground, I will use star washers that dig in. This bolt is cleaned on the back side. These threads are clean, and the threads are chased and clean here. So the two bolts are going to be the ground if the chassis is not. So it should be fine. That plate right now is fighting me. Okay, we got to fix that. What's going on? These holes in this plate aren't lining up with. There we go. Should now. Next one. Also, by the way, I cleaned all the paint off the back around these bolt holes. Motor still spins free. That's good. If it didn't, I'd have to remove one of those washers. And it doesn't. So now they got tighter. I'll take one of those out and we'll be fine. Yeah, I couldn't remember if there was one or two there. Seemed odd that there was two. I haven't cleaned up the band for this yet, so we'll go without that for now. Just recently got one because the band that was on it was all rusted so thin. That bolt had seen better days there. Alright. We spin free. Just realized I forgot to paint the heads of the bolts for the screws for this, but I'll just put it together and touch up paint them later. I gotta do the back bolts anyway. Now shall we test it? Okay, so I'm going to run this off a big battery charger. It will not have enough power to run it properly, but it'll tell me if it's working or not. Means these vice grips is a good ground. Clamps on this charger have seen better days. See if it does anything on 12 volt high before I put it to start. Looks like I might need to clean those terminals up in there. If I put you with something other than my finger, it works. Alright. That's working now. Fine, pushing it. We'll see how it works under real current later. I might have to do something with that button. I did bead blast it. It all looks clean, but it's also been sitting for a year. There's probably gaskets for this thing that's supposed to be there, but there was never one. We'll have to get it apart. Can live indoors anyway, so it should be fine. Alright. So that's not as awesome as some of the other builds, but it's a starter. It should work. And I'll clean up that band for it later. And the little piece of linkage up here that goes to the pull rod, I need to paint that up still. But starter itself's done at least. Now maybe we can start this thing once we put it together.